This meeting is being recorded.
Everybody. Everybody. Why don't we go ahead and get our roll call going? So, yeah. Oh,
Okay, so I think we'll do the call to order then. And then we just need to, what's not on the agenda is we need to go around to a roll call. So if everyone could just state their name and whether they're here in person or on Zoom. So we're going to start with there. We'll go around.
PJ Klein from the person. Sean Sullivan in person. Richard Smith in person.
Is this okay here? You just want to get four.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Lindsay Halleck in person.
why don't we go, y'all on the Zoom call? If you just do a quick roll call with y'all.
Okay, Jessica Cannon on Zoom.
Andrea Bennett on Zoom.
Evan Folds on Zoom.
Dave Mays.
David Ingram.
Corey Henning.
Roll call check. Joe Conway. And Diana.
Diana. Okay, and then I guess we will, do we need to make a motion to excuse anyone that's not here or no? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, which we do need to vote to approve. David took them out. Did everyone have a chance to look at them or any changes, anything?
No additional changes other than, yeah, I think the latest version I sent out was last Friday. That was, yeah.
Okay. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
A motion. I second. I second.
Okay, and then because people here in Zoom, we have to go around and vote individually, right? Okay, so, we'll just start again with PJ and vote yes or no.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, the minutes are approved, and so we are going into a few items that David is gonna run us through. And so I'm just gonna hand it over to you, David.
Do y'all on the Zoom call could be, I'm not sure if you, I don't guess you can see my screen, can you?
No, but I've got the stuff pulled up on my computer, so I'm good.
Okay, yeah, I
You
think,
can share it in the Zoom.
yeah, let me try to do that as well. Hold on, I'll share my screen here. Oh, there we go. Right here.
Entire screen, yeah. Share. And I'll change back to your presentation.
How about now?
Yep.
See that?
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just wanted to go over some of these initial action items, which we presented to City Council, which these are all items that came out of the clean energy, the advisory task force. that most of you all participated in. Jess, I know these are perhaps newer to you, but these were all items that were the efforts of the nearly year-long process from the task force. And these were initially recommended to council because they were what we felt were low-hanging fruit, and that we could initially pursue particularly in this first year of effort from the advisory committee. Of course, the first couple items on the list have already been acted upon and achieved. The City Council officially had a resolution to adopt the 2035 and 2050 energy goals. So those are now part of city policy, as well as forming this group. So we already have a couple of items that we can show that City Council has fully backed the recommendations and has acted upon. So moving on down the list is considering adoption of the LEED green building policy. That's for all new municipal construction. We can certainly get into the details of these once we pursue and act upon them. I'll certainly mention that a lot of the new construction that we're already pursuing, right now there's a River Lights Fire Station currently being planned, as well as the new Parks Maintenance Facility building where it's in the design phase as well, and both of those are pursuing LEED certification. So even though it's not an official policy yet, we're certainly leaning that way already with all of our new construction.
With the river lights, I guess, our stations, are like when it's time to decide whether or not a new fire station is needed, like due to growth or development in the area, is that something, like what's the process behind that, or would River Lights sort of match money to like upgrade it to a LEED, or is that just like something that came, like we need a new fire station there, and so we're gonna make it LEED?
So the city adopted a plan for fire station replacement. Gosh, 15 years ago, and many of the fire stations have already been replaced. In fact, the one on Shipyard Boulevard was the last one that was recently replaced. River Lights is a new station being installed because of growth, not because of replacement. So for the foreseeable future, I would say we're done. Just be blunt about it. We've gone through a process of building new one about every 2 to 3 years. Cinema Drive, the one on Cinema Drive, is the one that was LEED. I can't remember what it was. Silver.
Mm-hmm.
So most of them have been replaced, and just for your information, we strategically located them so that some of them could, when you build one new one, you decommission 2 of them. So we'll try to be more efficient in how we locate them as well.
Are there any projections for you, not to get into the weeds, but just, are there any estimated projections on far as based on the growth of the city, how many more stations we're going to need in the near future, or we should be covered?
With the state legislator taking away annexation authority from cities, our footprint doesn't get bigger unless somebody asks for it to. So we don't, there's no need for us to add new ones based on our current footprint. Gotcha.
Yeah, so the green building policy, that certainly looks at our new buildings that may be constructed or have major renovations done to it. Next is optimizing energy efficiency of our existing municipal buildings. Again, we can get into projects that we're working on as we perhaps begin work plans for all of these items. But I just wanted to kind of highlight some of what these initial actions are. Certainly, one of the things we're going to talk further about today is the Soul Smart program. I provided some additional info and documents about that. It's one area we really feel we can take some great initial steps and have another great win for this committee, some actions. Also things like supporting federal and North Carolina clean energy legislation, policy, and programs. Got a great representative here that can kind of help us with some of those as well, with the organization you're working up with. Installation of EV infrastructure at city facilities. So that's not only going to be some of our public facilities, but also some of our, like at our police stations, fire headquarters, or out at our operations center. So actually with that, I can share a little bit of news which just happened finished got installed on Friday. This is just across a couple blocks over at our Market Street parking deck. These were the two DC fast chargers that were installed as part of the VW settlement grant. So we're just the final few steps in regard to getting those fully activated with our charge point, which is the network that those will be on, and they will be open to the public for charging.
At a cost or?
Yeah, initially there's going to be no cost. We're going to be monitoring the usage data for 60 to 90 days, and then we'll be establishing something. So consider this the welcoming grace period. If anybody has any experience or at any of your facilities or anything like that, it'd be good to know about as we're looking at what we want to implement. One of the other areas we want to focus on with all of these projects, I think, that we pursue is participation of minority and women in business and equal opportunity for all of these projects that we're working on. So we're addressing the needs of everyone in the community. We also want to do things like looking at backyard composting and agricultural pilot programs where we can kind of indirect greenhouse gas emissions and sequestration of carbon aspects. It's, I think, an overlooked area that I think we could make some progress on as well. Any questions, comments from?
The county landfill, that doesn't fall under your purview, correct, as far as greenhouse gas emissions go, that doesn't tally in?
Well, I mean, we don't have direct control over it.
Right.
I'll have to say that in our greenhouse gas emissions report, it does not include estimated emissions from the stuff, the waste that we take there.
I just didn't know, because like you were talking about backyard composting and that kind of thing, I didn't know if there was a portion of this that counts, that's factoring in landfill waste already.
Yeah, not.
And it doesn't necessarily need to, I was just curious if it already did.
It's certainly an area. I mean, Dave and I were just having a conversation on Friday about we received a grant earlier this year for we purchased like 600 backyard compost bins that we gave out for free to residents.
Okay.
Is there a way that we can increase that? Is that a better way to address composting as opposed to, curbside service, where you still have, the transportation of that stuff from homes or businesses down to the site. So a number of areas that we could consider there.
David, I've got a comment. I don't know the best way to butt in on Zoom here.
No, just you did the perfect way there.
Okay, cool. So yeah, good question in regards to, kind of had a parallel question in regards to how the big picture works. If we're making commitments, I was actually one that was not involved in the task force. So apologies if this is common knowledge, but who actually certifies the 2035 and 2050 goals that we're pursuing? Is that, we hold ourselves accountable, or is there someone that evaluates that? How does that work exactly?
Yeah, it's the greenhouse gas emissions report. It'll be a way for us to track annually how we're doing, if we're on the right flight path to achieve those 2035, 2050 goals. So, the software and tracking program that we use is a, internationally recognized system for accounting greenhouse gas emissions, as well as, looking at our, the amount of clean energy that we're using. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was specifically wondering, is that self-accountability? Are we completing the software process and holding ourselves accountable, or will it be reviewed from a third party in some way?
I guess we haven't gotten to that detail yet. That's certainly something that we can speak to, address.
Okay, because I mean, clearly that impacts, if we're self-accounting. Questions that arise for me, and I don't know the appropriate time to bring them up, but high level, if we're offsetting energy from converting to electric vehicles, are we looking at where that energy is coming from? And if it comes from someone else, like the county, does that technically mean it's not ours? Sort of along the lines of the landfill conversation. It seems to me we wouldn't be able to capture any mitigation that might happen there or own any of the reality. But so I'm just trying to get the lane understood. If we're self-accounting, we can essentially set the process up however we want, versus someone third party would have some level of accountability we have to. I was just kind of looking for that piece to start.
David, can I start?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the best way to think about it is that there's an international standard, right, which most people are following the greenhouse gas protocol when they determine when they start their greenhouse gas emissions. And so I think David is certainly following that. Usually most cities do, and that's what the software helps him with. But then to your question as to our emissions from electricity we purchase, or things that are affecting, that usually gets covered the scopes, like scope 1, 2, and 3. So you're figuring out when you buy electricity, they buy it from Duke, and so then you need the emissions information from Duke to help you determine what your emissions are associated with that. And so I think when you start to get deeper into the emissions, it becomes tricky with supply chain emissions, because then you don't know, because a lot of groups aren't doing, it's not a required thing by law. So I think, even if you go to do a third-party verification, I'm under the impression it's really more like an audit based on what you said you did, and they're just making sure that you follow the rules. It's not really someone else doing a parallel emissions inventory. So I guess all that is to say, it's still kind of a growing science/art, but I think it's definitely a good idea to say what the limitations are, and they do that with waste and everything. But yeah, I think pretty much it is kind of.
What there's a baseline that you use compared to what you use in the baseline, and not add in new information.
Yes and no, in my opinion. And the reason I was going to say that is my question was going to be, this is purely greenhouse gas emissions as a total. you're a growing city, then you have to have an intensity. Likewise, if you're a dying city, you may hit your goal and not have to do anything. So, you know, I was looking through this to see if there was any intensity measures, whether it's greenhouse gas emissions per resident, greenhouse gas emissions per city employee, per vehicle, some kind of metric that's really what your baseline. Your baseline is a set number, but there's no intensity measure here. Because I was looking at this here, right? 2019 was higher than 2017, pre-pandemic, or 2007, pre-pandemic. And then we've had this decrease to 3.3%. I don't know how much of that's attributed to our actual, when I say us, I mean city, doing anything versus the effect of the pandemic.
Yeah,
And so it needs to have some kind of, that's one way, at least my thought is that's one way to look at it. Is you have to have some kind of intensity measure.
When there has to be a projection for, just like you said, there has to be a projection. Like you said, the city footprint is not necessarily increasing, but our population density may/likely will be. So we have to account for the increase, you know, if there's a, you know, I don't know what the standards are, but if there's a standard, then, you know, we need a police officer, a police vehicle for every X amount of residents, or, you know, X, Y, and Z, then we have to be able to account for that, and be able to project for that. So I agree with PJ that there has to be some kind of measurement we have to look at as far as what's going to be entailed in the projected growth to help account for the baseline, because we may be, you know, we may level off and may not see as much of a decrease, but if the projected increase is higher, then your avoidance is going to be higher as well.
Well, I think this all on-point discussion, and some of the information that you'll hear in a few minutes David talks about this might give you some indication to the answers. If we look back to when we started with this, the information that David and myself had available to kind of start with wasn't as good, sure, wasn't as consistent, wasn't as robust as we have now, certainly. So in 2017, we adopted ICLEI, we went with the ICLEI ClearPath tool as our measuring stick. And so confidently from that time, we can say going forward how we progressed. And going back to when the original ordinance or resolution was passed, that established our baseline. We can't sit here and say with 100% confidence in comparison to the numbers that we have now, you know, what was that correct back then? Correct. But I think you'll see from some of the discussion here is that the growth pressures that we're facing, more police officers, more trash trucks, et cetera, we're still maintaining. We're not getting worse, maybe marginally better, even with the, you know, additional population growth.
But, and I guess just to get back to Evan's question, so like, I think he was more, Evan, I guess you're more saying like, how are we gonna, who's gonna be making sure that the city keeps improving? And I guess, you know, that's like, this was something that the council adopted, and I guess is that what you were asking? Like, how are we gonna make sure that they keep actually achieving these goals?
Well, yeah, in a sense. I mean, I guess to try to put a situational point on it, if we're going to ensure that we're offsetting emissions and we're converting electric vehicles or to electric vehicles, and that electricity is coming from a coal plant, are we accounting for that? And if we're not, do we have to account for that, or will somebody else account for that? You know, like, who's got the ball here? And if it's us having the ball, I guess I'm just trying to search for the intention, because there's an ability to say what we're doing when we're not, sort of thing.
Yeah, in the scope, in the way that scopes are defined, they require you to account for that. And so I think David will get into that when we get more into here. But I guess one of the things, like, what they were saying, maybe you could talk about is like, I definitely agree about having like a standardization of emissions to help you better understand, but the goal itself isn't actually a reduction compared to the baseline. The goal is 50% clean energy of whatever the energy we're using at the time, right?
No, I think it's reduction over, from a 2007 baseline. Reduce municipal operations greenhouse gas emissions by 58% by 2050 from 2007 baseline of 97.04 metric tons of CO2.
And that's just total, right? So if our city doubles, you'll never hit it. Like,
No, you can. Well, I mean, because you can't without making major changes.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Okay.
saying. That's why it needs to be intensity measured. I mean, we're playing Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah, no. Well, I guess
This
that,
total metrics is going to be hard. Metric tons is going to be hard to hit if you're in a growing situation.
I think you can still use this metric, but I think we would have to create a projection based on total growth. You'd have to, like, if we're going off of this was the total greenhouse gas emissions in 2007, then you have to be able to create a projection for, based on growth, what's the total projected greenhouse gas emissions for 2050? Because just like PJ said, it's unfortunately the city is not static. We're not under static conditions. So any reductions that we make aren't going to be able to be quantified accurately if we're not accounting for the extra growth and usage that's involved with city operations.
well, sorry, we're like getting really deep into the emissions. Do you want to finish item number 1 first about the Soul Smart, and then we can like go back to
Yeah,
this?
we're getting into these
This
greenhouse
is item number 2.
Of course, yeah,
We'll talk
exactly.
about it,
Yeah.
Before we move on, two things. One is, we're telling you about these things because these are going to be the first things that we're bringing to you regularly.
Right.
I didn't know that. I apologize. Oh, we're good. Thank you. These are the first things that are going to be on your agendas for the next bit.
This is we're tracking this. That's what.
Yeah. But specifically, the 10 items that Dave just went through, those are going to be the things that come up on your agendas for the next little bit. Secondly, one of the items in here specifically related to NWBE Enterprises. And I just wanted to introduce Joe Conway in the back here. He's a visitor. He has recently come to the city as the city's new and first Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer. So that's why Joe was here visiting with us today. So,
well,
good
okay.
job.
That's awesome.
Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I love the great discussion we're already having in regard to these items, and we will absolutely be able to dive in depth into them as we move forward. But let's continue with the agenda. I think the next thing I wanted to bring up was the Soul Smart program. And this was the brief that they put together for the city, and just some general information about the program. And this program doesn't necessarily address municipal operations. It's more about kind of having this city be open for business, if you will, for solar projects at both the residential and commercial buildings. So, but it does involve the city and the county in regard to both our zoning and our planning and inspection methods for implementing solar. So that's where this Soul Smart program really helps you streamline those what they call soft costs in regard to solar programs here in the city. It's a free service through the North Carolina Energy Technology Center that they will help local governments through this process. And if you go through their various steps, you can actually have your city certified as a Soul Smart city. So we feel it's a really worthwhile program. I'm just trying to get to some of the information here, kind of what is Soul Smart and how it's funded. The technical assistance is provided through the North Carolina Clean Energy Center. And that's the goal at the bottom there is just to foster the development of mature solar markets in your city. So actually some other sustainability colleagues there in the picture from up in the Triangle area recently certified both of their cities. We've had a number of conversations with the North Carolina team already, as well as some of the Department of Energy folks. The other, just if there's any other info I just want to highlight here. It just kind of highlight some of the costs involved. It's not only the physical costs of the products, but the permitting and inspection fees and all of those areas that the program helps you try to streamline. Just some of the economic benefits of reducing the soft costs, additional business it could bring to our community. There's really not a downside to this program. To me, it can really help us kind of lead by example, if you will, in regard to showing that the city is providing favorable conditions for implementing solar to all of its citizens, providing the information available in an easy to find location for how to go through the process. It would involve coordination between our city planning staff in regard to the zoning aspects of it, as well as collaboration with the county folks in regard to the inspection of solar systems. Next slide.
So is this just for residential, or does it also consider like utility scale?
Not so much. It's more residential, I would say small commercial projects. It does touch on utility scale in regard to, I think one of the certification points is, looking at any land available within the jurisdiction that's available for utility scale.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how much of that we have left in the jurisdiction, but yeah.
You're gonna create the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least it gets you, thinking, whether that's city-owned land or residential land that, you could, be in conversation with the owners.
I saw in the brief that it talks about that a lot of the permitting process and such is through the county government. Has the county hired a counterpart for you to work with? Have they filled their sustainability manager position, or they got it?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if it's still something they're looking at.
I left the position in like 2017 or 2018, and to my knowledge, they haven't refilled it. So I was just curious if there was a counterpart for you to work with if we go forward with this, with the county side of the training.
Yeah. I think an update to the assessment that they did is I just had an email from some of the North Carolina folks last week that they have already been in touch with the county folks on the inspection side.
Okay.
And they've had a great initial meeting, and they said that it sounded like they were very much on board with taking steps in regard to the ones that kind of fall under their jurisdiction. I think they're trying to plan an additional meeting coming up, and I asked to be a part of that. So those conversations have already started kind of behind the scenes with the county folks. So I think I did provide the
did you think that we had completed any of these that they said we didn't or that's not completed?
Sorry, say that again.
Well, there's a lot of things here that are not completed or unknown. I just didn't know if you were, you know.
Yeah, they did this initial assessment just kind of from publicly available information they were able to find until we were like officially on board and signed on to pursue the project. That was kind of the best information that they could provide. I mean, but you know, it's a very favorable assessment. I think they said it was pretty easy for us to go ahead and achieve silver. And this was before they had had any of the communications with county folks. So I think we would be, looking at perhaps even gold certification for the city, which would be, I think a great achievement right off the bat. So kind of, Dave, if you let me speak to kind of next steps as far as, as far as moving towards that process to officially.
Yeah, I think next step for this group is to kind of digest the information that we've given you. And we will be prepared to bring an item back to this group just to say, acknowledge how y'all like us to move forward. In terms of after this committee, it could be presented to the city council in the form of a resolution to formally pursue the Soul Smart designation. And when we get to the next meeting where we bring that, we'll have that kind of vetted out in preparation for y'all, so that you know that moving forward.
We need to do another reevaluation assessment before we decide we want to move forward. Yeah. This was only done on publicly available information without. There's something between 0 and go, or is it preliminary or you go?
I mean, I think even this preliminary one shows that we could achieve silver.
Yeah.
And anything above and beyond that to me would just be icing on the cake. I mean, I would, but that's for the group to decide as well. If we take a official vote on, I mean, we could certainly ask them to perhaps update the assessment based on their communications with the county.
There's no associated cost, correct?
No. Mm-mm.
So in my mind, I don't see the downside as far as if we adopt this as we support pursuing this. And if you don't get the certification, that hasn't cost us anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just staff time. So
we should pursue it. And if we start, or if they start undertaking another assessment where they show whether these benchmarks have been met or not, these prereqs have been met or not, we may determine, okay, well, look, we would need to complete 10 of these prereqs at a cost of X, Y, and Z, so maybe it's not worth pursuing. But at that point, it hasn't hurt us any. We haven't made any commitment to it. So
I think Evan has his hand up for you.
Yeah, thanks. Just as a point of process, and it may be that Dave answered this, but just for clarity, what is the staff looking for this board for in this situation? Like to evaluate it, like I read through the information, it seems like it's no harm, no foul. It can only bring a level of benefit. So assuming that the board felt it was good, it seems like staff would then make a recommendation for a resolution potentially for council. Are we authorizing? I don't think that we're authorizing or we're asking staff to go do that. Like, what's the process here? Like we have this opportunity, we go through it, we endorse it, and then staff makes a decision as to whether to pursue it or not, or is that our decision that staff needs to pursue it? How does that work?
we only make recommendations.
Right. This board is advisory in nature. So this one, like all the other recommendations that come through, you're going to help us go through what the task force created. We're going to flush out some of the details that we need to assess in proceeding with each and every one of them as we go forward, before we take your recommendations, which may be altered or slightly different from what the task force came up with. There may be variations to that. Staff's job will then be to take that forward to council along with things like financial impacts and ordinance changes, responsibilities, that sort of thing, so that council can make a decision based on the advice given by this board to staff.
Okay.
Does that help?
It's helpful. Keep practicing. I appreciate it though.
I think one thing to think about, and I think, obviously this program maybe differs a little bit than some of the other stuff that we're talking about, in the sense where implementing this program would be for not just talking about city facilities, honestly, right? Which is like when we're talking about the city's clean energy goals, about like looking at city-owned assets. And this program is a little bit different than some of the other programs, because this is going to be helping residents reduce their carbon footprint, or, the kinds of community reduces carbon footprint. And so, don't get me wrong, I think that's amazing, obviously, but, thinking about the very real, capacity, bandwidth issues, time, resources on, balancing all the ways the city can help its residents and its businesses reduce their emissions versus you focusing on actually reducing organizational emissions. I think that'll be something also important to consider, and just mapping out staff time and resources to those things.
Yeah, certainly one of the things that came out of the task force, I think was, the city wants to, lead by example. And, I think part of that is, not only looking at our own operations and how we do things, but, what can we do to, make it easier and incentivize clean energy and greenhouse gas reductions throughout the community. So I think this is a perfect example of, one of those steps, as well as, making a program that's available and equitable across the community. So.
Yeah, so kind of thinking about, there's the work that we're going to do to reduce actual emissions from the city assets themselves. And there's also sort of this broader work of normalizing clean energy and like you said, kind of setting the tone in the community that this is something we encourage and we hope that people do. So,
the non-quantifiable aspects of it, we're not tallying metric CO2 that we're taking out by using this program, but there's a community value added to the community by implementing it.
Yeah, this program won't help the city asset reduce, right? Because, but yes, it will. So I just think couching it and contextualizing as to why it's important, I think that's another.
Yeah, economic benefits to the city by bringing new development, new jobs, growth in this industry to the area. So a lot of side benefits in addition to the reduction in GHG emissions. So I had another point in mind. Kind of tagging back onto the green building policy. I've already had some side discussions with some of our planning department, as well as they're working on some new kind of community-wide kind of urban development plans as well. And, and they asked for a copy of our draft green building policy to kind of see where we were leaning with that to, in the areas that they're looking at is, what can they do to incentivize green building in the private sector as well. So, they're, again, looking beyond municipal operations and incentives and that kind of thing for the private sector. So.
I just have one comment about this on the planning and zoning credits. C1 says required for bonds, but yet it's not yet completed and easy to do, so it seems like that would be the only thing that looked like not there bond-wise.
Yeah, I probably could have provided some clarity to the team that put that assessment together. You know, again, they just kind of did it from information they could find publicly, but I think there's a few of those credits in there that additional credits that we would already qualify for as well.
David, if I could just add, you know, they do kind of call out like it seemed that a lot of the credits were by providing a checklist memo or a checklist document. And they, you know, called out that while they're looking for that information to be provided by the county government, the development of that checklist document could be done by city staff. And so it feels like that's where we might have the most impact in terms of like the partnership that we can offer to try to move this forward perhaps faster. And then one other one that, because like you said, I think a lot of this might already be existing, just not easily found on the county website, like you called out. And then one other point that as I was reading through all of the different items that they have on here, the one that I was kind of curious about just for myself was about, it was PZ 12, where they're talking about, because it sounds like we've already, like a lot of the zoning stuff, we had gathered points higher up, but then they were talking about the decommissioning plan that outlines the terms and conditions for the proper removal at the end of its useful life cycle, and you know, restoration as needed and returning to other land use and all of that stuff. I was just wondering if you knew, you know, it says assessment not completed, but as you said, there could have been more information provided if it had been a larger conversation from the outset. Is that something that's already sort of set up or on the way? That one just kind of stood out to me as like, oh, that is a great call out, and I'm curious what's already in place.
Yeah, I think that's certainly speaking directly to the utility scale projects. Yeah, I don't think we've had any conversation like in discussion about that internally yet. Yeah, but I would say that would be one area we would certainly like to address in the assessment if we choose to pursue it. I think we would definitely want something in there in regard to how we're going to dispose and reuse land, or you know, even if the project perhaps is beyond its useful life with the solar panels and such that are there, you know, would it go back to vacant land, or would it just be, you know, upgraded to what the current technology is? So, but yeah, I don't think we've had any conversation in regard to that yet, Andrea.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So do we want to maybe, I don't know if anybody else has any other questions about item one, but I'm just thinking about time. Want to make sure that we all have time to talk about the greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, we definitely, we have a packed full agenda, you know. You know, maybe that's something you and I can discuss as we move forward, is how much stuff do we want on each agenda?
Right.
Because I love all the conversation for sure. Yeah, so just for to kind of close out the Soul Smart. So next steps will be for us to perhaps something.
They will investigate the reassessment and try and come back with some additional information. Discuss this with you in preparation to come back with this board taking action on that item so that we can move forward with that recommendation. Sound good?
Yeah.
Would it be practical for you to come back to us with a estimate on financial resources that we would have to put together to get these assessments? You know, so we would have an idea of what the financial impact to the city would be as far as, okay, if we're going to move forward with this, we need this assessment, X, Y, and Z. Is that something that's practical to be able to estimate or quantify, or is that just kind of, we won't know until we get into it?
I I think it's fair for you to ask, what would trigger a financial impact. I'm not confident that I could say exactly what it would be, but I think it's prudent to ask the question and ask us to come back to the next meeting with an understanding of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest impacts are going to be any staff time that's required to, help with this. But I mean, we can certainly talk with the organizations involved and see if there's any financial. But
it seems to me like I think we're all in agreement that this is, something we're definitely interested in. I know have expressed that you're interested in doing it. And so I guess to me, I'd be interested in reviewing whatever product you would need to get this program approved. So, like actually like whatever you would need to bring, if it's council that has to approve this, or if it's just like something that you have the authority to do on your own, like at the department level, whatever, you kind of like, to me, that's where the rubber hits the road in the sense of how you're going to like sell it and talk about it and things that could come up. So it feels like would include audiences and a timeline of implementation, that kind of thing. So I don't know who needs to ultimately take action on this to get it approved. Does it rise to the council?
I think we can figure that out.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like,
Yeah, in preparation for the next meeting, so that you guys know what your recommendation, how it's impacting.
Exactly.
Madam Chair, could I just make one observation and a question? It seems like this is a package that requires a lot of coordination with the county. And I wonder if this time it would make sense to ask that staff come back to us, maybe taking some time to identify a person at the county who would maybe spearhead that coordination with the city. And if we could have a timeline for that, because a lot of this just seems to be short half-day and coordinating with the county in terms of the permitting. That seemed to be the bulk of the stuff that we have not been able to address. So I wonder if there's a way for the city to establish who at the county that would be. And then those two staff people can kind of come out with a punch list to make this happen, because this does not seem to be a big expenditure. It's just a little staff time. Is that accurate?
yeah, I believe that's accurate. And I do have a name with the county person they've already had a meeting with, and I think I mentioned that I think they're trying to schedule a second meeting, and I've asked to be involved in that. So I should have those county staff names as well by the time we get together again.
That would be great. I think those processes where if you just put two people in a room and have them come up with a timeline and the list of how they want to tackle this, that might be a good document for us to kind of periodically review and encourage them to move with the time.
Yeah, and if I may just piggyback that a little bit, I have a feeling that's going to come up at every turn because we're overlapping almost completely. So it does seem appropriate on an even larger level to establish that point person at the county and an appetite to work with us in general, if that hasn't been done. I totally agree with that, Jess.
Great points, guys. Thanks. All right, why don't we move to the greenhouse gas report. Yeah, I know we've got a lot to get through still. Oops, sorry. I thought I had already opened this document.
actually on Internet Explorer?
Oh, no, I already had all this open. Oh, here we go. Okay. This was the report that you all have in front of you and that we presented to council a little over a month ago. Just outlining some of the historical efforts the city has made, going all the way, all the way back to 2006, and then kind of some of the more recent efforts the city has made in support of greenhouse gas reductions and efforts, the task force and that we're undertaking with this group. You guys have already seen the goal is a 58% reduction by 2050. That's from a 2007 baseline. Again, y'all's points in regard to perhaps improvements in how this report's presented were noted, and perhaps it's something we can work towards in the future. Again, this is just looking at municipal operations as well. At some point, I think we also need to have a community-wide greenhouse gas emissions report that we can work towards in looking at effects that this group and other city and county staff are working towards to reduce emissions.
I have a question, and I guess, because earlier when I said that, like our goal isn't one that's like associated with baseline, and I guess, where did this goal come from? Because like the one that the Clean Energy Task Force set up is the one where it's like 50% clean energy by 2035 and then 100%. And I guess wherever that came from, that's like an emissions goal. So then do these goals kind of translate into that goal?
Not apples for apples or even, that's 58% by 2050 was established years ago before I even got here. So,
got it. Okay.
So
that's
was presenting
2006 U.S. Conference of Mayors Climate Protection Agreement. That was the origination of the 58% reduction.
Oh, okay, got it.
So it's intertwined, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you've done the math on it. If we meet these goals, would we meet that goal?
Yeah, I feel that
Okay.
we would. The impacts that we do towards clean energy specifically will definitely have a huge impact on our greenhouse gas emissions. So, I think I've presented to y'all that, our fleet represents over 60% of our emissions and impact, and that's a huge area for us to be able to address as far as municipal operations. So,
so assuming Duke does its part,
Duke,
meeting our goal is gonna.
Duke has its goals for cleaning up the grid. We use as far as our emissions factors that we use to calculate greenhouse gas emissions, we use the regional EPA eGrid numbers. That come out every 2 years. So that, there's always, a lag in kind of the emission factors that you're using. But I wish those came out every year, but I think what the latest ones that are out are like from 2018. As far as the eGrid factors, do you have any info on that? So as far as I know, it's that every 2 years EPA comes out with new eGrid numbers. And then just a couple graphical examples of where we were back in 2007 and where we are now. That does represent in that top graph where we FY21 number of 9,386 It does represent a 3.3% reduction since 2007. It's, you know, if you are looking at a 1.3% reduction per year since that 2007, you know, we're a bit above where we need to be. So, you know, despite efforts, you know, for us to improve our fuel efficiency in our fleet, doing energy efficiency projects in existing city facilities, and you know, building our new facilities to more energy efficient or LEED standards has gotten us so far, but we need to increase those efforts and increase those intensity of efforts that we're pursuing in order for us to get to that 2050 goal. You know, it's time for us to, I think, begin to think outside the box and a bit more aggressively. So, you know, that's where I think we're going to be looking towards, you know, this group to make recommendations and advice and explore options for us to, you know, be able to take up the ladder to implement here in the city. So
this red dot / line,
yep.
That's like where we want to be. So this year we want to drop like higher or something.
Yeah. I mean, in order to get on that glide path, we're going to have to up the game. So
that, I'm sorry, y'all. It's so awkward being on Zoom, but and I'm just going to apologize up front for this question, but I'm just searching for baseline clarity. Is this an emissions effort or a clean? I was just really confused by what we were just talking about with the 58%. And if we could just maybe, in concise a way as possible, kind of describe the charter of what we're doing. And with that, also the comments that were being made earlier about population growth. And I mean, I'm having a little trouble understanding what the complexity is of this. If we're talking about a baseline from years ago and meeting that by 2050, clearly it's not that straightforward. So are we equipped with that, or do we need to generate that? Where are we at in that process?
To generate what? I don't follow the end of your question.
Yeah, well, that chart we were just looking at had a decrease by 2050 based on 2007 numbers, I believe. I'm not looking at it still, but clearly the city is going to grow in between then and 2050. So I'm wondering how that reality is accounted for in our goal setting. And then within that, are we doing that to reduce the emissions or to generate a percentage of clean energy? Like what's the actual point here?
Well, yeah, again, this was, you know, the greenhouse gas emissions report specifically. And, you know, efforts that this group, which is kind of focused more on clean energy, specifically, efforts that we take to address that are definitely going to have a big impact on our greenhouse gas emissions. So I would say these, you know, those two focus areas are intertwined. But you know, this report was being presented as you know, additional information to the group to kind of see where we are in regard to greenhouse gas emissions. But you know, our clean energy efforts to you know, hit the 2035 and 2050 clean energy goals are somewhat separate from this greenhouse gas emission goals. So
which one is our charter though, is the specific question. Are we reducing emissions, or are we fine? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's the ones presented in the task force report, and I've got a hard copy for you as well. At some point.
I've got that. I guess I'm just being confused by the conversation a little bit, so maybe I'll just listen a little more. Thanks.
The goals are outlined on page 8 of the report, and that's what our mandate is part of the report. This greenhouse gas emissions reduction is a separate target that they have set that is adjacent to, but not part of our mandate, from my understanding.
Helpful. Thank you.
You'll
Yes,
be reducing greenhouse gases.
correct.
Yeah, great question though, Evans. They are side by side, but you know, not not directly comparable. But
I think it's
Because
important.
there'll be other ways to reduce emissions, like the city in theory could find like other ways to reduce these emissions that aren't related to clean energy. But our job is to focus on the clean energy portion.
correct.
I do think one thing that I think we'll need more information on kind of at the start, is because of how this goal is stated, where our goal is to hit 50% clean energy, we need more information from city staff on how you're quantifying where our energy is coming from. You know, what counts as clean energy and because obviously we use electricity. You know, electricity is provided by the utility. So we need to know how you or the utility is supplying you with information on what's clean and what's not clean. Because we can't really work towards goals if we just have electricity and now we're going to keep using electricity. We need a way to know what is clean electricity and what's coal or gas, fossil fuel powered electricity. So we need more. I feel like
the E-grid number there.
okay.
So the E-grid number is what David was just talking about. It's on this page here. And this is like an EPA number that EPA gets from Duke and the other utilities. And they use that information to calculate an emissions rate of where you live. So it's based on like the locality. And so you're in a certain E-grid area.
Yeah, we use the regional number, which you know, energy goes into a grid and it's all
Right.
You know, it's not like we
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys know about that. So,
But yeah, so you can see how that's changed over time. And then presumably it's, you know, because Duke is not required to reduce their own emissions from HB 951. So as that number goes down, then we get like the happy benefits of that by not really doing very much just because Duke's cleaning up, then our emissions get to go down.
What is it? If that's how we're quantifying it though, don't we need to be working with the utility and not the city?
Well, I would say behind the scenes, we are working closely with the utility.
Right. But I'm just thinking, this is the number that we're going off of, and then this is the number provided by the utility, then it's kind of independent of what we're doing here.
Well,
No, not all of it.
if you electrify your fleet, then you're still driving gas vehicles.
But that's greenhouse gases, that's not 50% clean energy.
Well, we also said energy efficiency.
Well, electrify,
I agree with you there,
But you know, part of the task force report recommendations, this is also addresses our fleet as well. So again, part of the
electrifying 50% of the fleet by 2035. It might be helpful to pull, or I guess, maybe it'd be helpful as resources to pull, to like maybe you can show the E-grid information, and then you can see exactly how much Duke has of coal and how much they have of natural gas and nuclear.
Yeah, in interject, working like with the utility, I'm part of a few cities here in North Carolina that were North Carolina Clean Cities Collaborative. And so Duke is part of those, I don't know, bi-monthly meetings we're having at this point, where they're looking at each city's needs, and they're going to hope to come up with some kind of custom plans for each city to help us meet our individual emissions and clean energy goals. So, you know, whether that's looking at community solar projects, or if there's, you know, large scale utility projects that could be implemented in the area, or a variety of different project types. They're committed to working with individual cities to help us achieve those.
So to clarify, so then how are you, the city staff or whoever is holding us accountable, going to quantify what we're doing and how does that translate towards 50% clean energy? Because at first you said that we're going to go off this greenhouse gas emissions report, but that's just tracking GHGs, and that's not tracking clean energy. So we're not focusing on GHGs.
So how are we going to measure?
Yeah, how
clean energy?
how are we quantifying the success that the city's having or not?
Yeah, I guess that's
my question.
Yeah, I guess that's TBD in a way, and depending on the projects and directions we pursue. Is it going to be solar projects on top of city facilities? That would be easy for us to measure. If we get just like we have a few solar facilities already across the city. Obviously, we're not going to get to that. There's only so much square footage of city buildings, so obviously we're going to have to, look at bigger projects in some way, whether that's before Duke had that Green Source Advantage program, which has kind of gone by the wayside. I think it's yet to be determined from Duke, what other type of projects that they're going to implement across the state. Obviously, I think we're going to have to, be looking at some of those type of projects outside of city limits in order for us to be able to achieve those goals. So
I think it's a good point what he's saying. I think the question here is like, if we're trying to get to 50% clean energy by 2035, where are we now?
You have to be able to quantify the progress.
Right, and so I think, what we're missing the data point is in between this emissions number, what is that?
So how much clean energy we have right now?
Right.
From Duke, which is what makes up this emissions number, so maybe it might be nice to like go back to the e-grid and then do like one of those pie things that Duke has, you can see this number is made up of.
Yeah, I mean, the e-grid number, they do break down,
Exactly.
what each of those components
And
are.
then we kind of know how much clean energy we're getting through Duke and how much we need to create on our own.
If Duke supplies some kind of standardized breakdown as far as, for every megawatt of energy you're using, 35% of it is clean and, 46% of it is coal, et cetera, like, because all we're going to be able to track is staff and operations is usage. We're not going to be, if you put solar panels on the roof, you can track how many kilowatt hours are coming from solar panels, but otherwise, all you're going to be able to track from the electricity side is how much we're using, not where it's coming from. So we need some kind of standardized unit to be able to convert, usage to how percentage of clean versus dirty.
And two other things that we had talked about during the task force. Is nuclear considered clean or not?
Yeah.
Right. That's something that needs to be answered. And the second thing is, if I have a 5 megawatt facility, I'm not just going to go put 2.5 megawatts worth of solar panels out there just to say I'm at 50%. You got to focus. That's wasteful spending. You should be doing energy efficiency things. So how do we account for that in your transition?
That's kind of what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at. Is if a big part is like in your slides as far as first initiatives go, and between his energy efficiency, that's where the end outcome of that is a reduction in usage. Absolutely. And so we need to be able to quantify that into a percentage of clean energy use. We're now talking about use avoidance.
Yeah.
And we're not using clean energy, we're using no energy, which is by transition.
That's the
so we need to be able to, that has to, we're talking about how you didn't have as good information in 2007 when we started the baseline. I want to make sure that as we start this task force, you start collecting, you start having those things set up at the outgo. So as you're tracking towards 2035 and 2050, you have those benchmarks to work off of. You're not 10 years later when the city council says, all right, we're 3 years off for our 2035 target. How close are we? You're not looking, well, okay, well, now we need to figure out how to quantify this.
Yeah, and it's that's something, like Duke already has and publishes that information. That's how they get the e-grid numbers. So that's like an easy thing that you could do just to kind of give us the data point in between this and.
I think going forward from, your greenhouse gas emissions report is one thing, but going forward, we need to be able to track that number as well. Because that's more relevant to us here versus CO2 emissions.
Well, that's a byproduct though. Greenhouse gases are gonna go down if we follow the chart.
Correct. Yeah, I understand, but this unit giving us this report as a measurement is not as useful to us because that's not what we're tracking. So that's not our mandate.
That's right.
Also, something to consider is, we're looking at clean energy and Duke just transforms all of our coal power plants to natural gas. Greenhouse gas emissions will go down, but it won't be clean energy, according to our chart. And that's what they did over here, was it South Dakota or something?
So,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is a reduction in greenhouse gas.
I would say that's certainly one of the things we're advocating for across the state to Duke is, let's just not replace coal with natural gas. Let's look at, some of the other alternatives.
Later, the next item is for one of the recommendations is advocacy, and that's like, so right now, the carbon plan is the big way that Duke is going to tell everyone how they're going to meet their goals that the law provided. And I think that is a huge point that cities and businesses can make. It's like, oh, Duke, like we have clean energy goals, and like if you guys are using natural gas, we're not going to meet our goals. And I think that's a big pressure point that that in the city's advocacy, they can really rely on that and team up with other corporations and stuff that have that. And I know David's super involved in a lot of that stuff. So, but yeah, that's like exactly the point. Like this isn't going to cut it.
This piece has been really helpful for me. It's clear that we need to measure, to be able to measure and define what clean energy is to begin with, or we're just in the wind. And that's a good point just brought up about if Duke Energy is not willing to move in the way that we are, how does that impact the stated goals, which is maybe a high level answer now in some way.
Could I just interrupt you for 1 sec?
Yeah, sure.
So one thing, I think it's important that we stay at 20,000 feet for these first few meetings. We're not a utility. We can't control the blend of our carbon uses. But I think the low hanging fruit for a municipality is electrifying the fleet, retrofitting the buildings as efficient as possible, doing as much, for example, solar on our own roofs and in our own spaces as we can. And then partnering with places around the state that are electrifying the grid, putting up more infrastructure for EVs. Those are going to be the places where we can help the city identify opportunities to just reduce our overall footprint. And that will naturally mean more clean energy. We can't control Duke's blend. We can certainly work with them. But I think in terms of when we get together and talk, we should sort of have as our major goals figuring out how quickly we can electrify the fleet. I think it's going to be faster than 2035 at half. I think that whole market is just moving so quickly. And we know, I think we replace, 50 cop cars a year. I don't know if anyone in this room has the numbers on that, but we have at least 200 patrol cars, and those need to be replaced on a regular basis. So maybe helping push the city towards setting up a pilot program for a couple of police force cars this year so they can start, because it takes a while to get used to that. An organization needs to have 6 to 12 months to study how they're going to integrate EVs. So I just wanted to share, sitting on the board at CFPUA, what they do is so energy intensive that there's only so many places where we can affect change. But a municipality, we know where their carbon footprint is. It's in their buildings and it's in their fleet. So anyway, I just wanted to share that to kind of refocus us as we're starting to get to know all these different parameters that we need to look at. Thanks.
I think that's a great point. It's also a good segue. Item number 3, David.
It is. Try to be mindful because I know we still need to try to figure out ongoing meeting dates. So. yeah, this is just kind of a brief. Here's where we are, kind of, this has been our electricity usage. This is for all city facilities as well as street lights, area lights, and things like that. So it's more than just buildings, but just kind of gives you a idea of kWh per year. As you can see, we had some fluctuations up and down. Could be, it could be due to a variety of factors. Certainly there's some growth in there. Certainly there's, certainly the weather, and whether it's an extremely hot or cold year impacts that as well. And even things like, Hurricane Florence in FY19 and these last few years, the pandemic, I'm sure has had some impact. So, these are just straightforward numbers.
So these are raw, these aren't adjusted to baseline, correct? Like as far as weather tuning and.
No, they're not, just straight numbers. So we could certainly do that as well going forward. That
If it was dollarized, I'd say weather tuning, but we'll see.
I mean, if it's hotter, then they're gonna use more kilowatt hours.
Yeah, but overall, it's not gonna change much.
When we start talking about energy efficiency and reducing runtime, peak runtime.
Yes. I'm talking about just these raw numbers here.
Sure. Well, I'm just thinking going forward, if you need something to compare to, then.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that range, right? 10.5 to 12.7.
Are there many government employees working from home? Just curious if that.
More now.
Yeah.
Is that gonna stay permanent?
TBD.
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, my department, no, because we can't do our job unless we're here. But other departments, where we have that opportunity, that's certainly under consideration to extend that as a benefit. It's also a way to help recruit people,
So yeah, just same numbers, just in a quick trend line there. I mean, over the last 5 to 6 years here, to show slight downward trend, but again, just the raw numbers without heating, cooling days or anything like that factored in, or staff growth, anything like that. I'd like to think that's all because of the energy efficiency projects and better building things that we've been doing. But your point in regard to energy avoidance, that's certainly anything we can do to optimize energy use and decrease the amount of energy that we're using is going to help us achieve our goals better. So that should always kind of be the baseline that we're working towards, is improving the existing facilities that we already have, which we do.
I mean, you average out those first 4 fiscal years, it's flat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the last 2 are where your decline comes in. Well, it's just not wrong.
I think you guys had a question previously just in regard to building automation systems. What I can share is we've got a bit of a mishmash. It's one area that we've had quite a bit of discussion around. I know it's a topic of discussion for Christine Sims, our facilities director, department director. As you can see, the BAS systems we have in various, and this is just kind of a highlight of some of our high energy using facilities. These are the different systems. she would love it if every single building had the same system and she could sit at her desk and control everything from right there. I think this certainly highlights an area where we could focus some energy and is there a way we can have everything on a single system that, is controllable and
It may not be practical to get them all on the same system, but even if you can just establish remote access to each different one, that would go a long way.
yeah.
Which is our goal. We're actually missing the Shipyard Fire Station.
Yeah, she wasn't quite sure the name of that system.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, another system, it's not fully.
Was that all because of the procurement process or something that they were the cheapest systems that?
It's all part of the bidding. They could, the controls contractors priced very wildly.
Differing consultants with differing project managers leads to different systems.
Without her input sometimes on, hey, here's what we prefer, here's what our guys know how to work on.
Here's system number 6, start learning how to use this one.
So it was a good question for y'all to bring this up because I think it certainly focuses on an area where we could have some improvements. So. And the other area I just wanted to highlight was our current energy tracking software. We use Energy Manager, which is provided by Dude Solutions, but it's what we began using this, Dave, like what, 2017, I think. So much more robust system than what was used before. It really allows us to, drill down on a variety of different factors. We input monthly energy use from the various facilities into here. I'm not sure, what systems you guys may use. I'd love to compare and contrast, but it allows us to, look at, all facilities across the city, or if we wanted to drill down on a single facility, look at its energy use, fire headquarters. We can drill down and look and see what that individual building is doing. Whether we wanted to look at all the energy combined or just electricity, just natural gas. It's a pretty robust system that allows us to look at a variety of factors. If we do energy efficiency improvements, you can put the project details into here and kind of look at cost avoidance and that kind of thing. I really like this tool. It's our energy use ranking. Again, if we wanted to look at different facility groups, I'll use fire department again as an example, since those are similar type facilities for usage. Let's go back to September 2022, and it basically ranks the facilities based on this last column here is EUI, energy use intensity. So it allows us to look at which facilities are using the most energy, which number for some reason.
Sorry, are these only the facilities that have the automation system?
Nope, these are all utilities.
Every facility we got.
And so the data, if it doesn't have a system, the data comes from the Duke bill?
They're all the data should come from the Duke bill.
Yeah.
All the data comes from the Duke bill?
From the utility bill.
Yeah, so PMOD or whatever, okay. And so you download those and upload them to this?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Although I'm waiting for Duke data since they just transfer yours.
I'm dealing with the same headache, yeah.
Have you gotten anything since October?
I have, but I had to go through manually and match up the old meters and account codes to the new ones.
You know, I'm currently, updating every single one of our
Yeah.
accounts with new meters.
It's
and
been
new
an
account
idea,
codes.
the business.
You
side
see,
of it.
Dave, I'm not the only one sharing this nightmare.
It's everyone, the transition.
So, anyway, this allows us to go and, look at which buildings across the city have the highest EUI, and that's where we target our energy efficiency efforts to try and drive down those high energy users.
Just out of curiosity, how much of your efforts are targeted at, like, do you investigate like behavioral recommendations? Like, if Fire Station A and Fire Station B are both similar, operation wise, and one is significantly higher than the other, do you go in and kind of talk to them about how they're using the station to determine why their usage is so much higher than another similarly operated station?
Yeah, it certainly allows for that. I know in some, we've had issues with, people go, even though a thermostats are set in, under a, lockbox kind of thing, they're still adjusting thermostats beyond what the facilities department tries to keep them set at. So, yeah, it does allow us to identify and have those conversations where necessary. So anyway, I just wanted to present kind of how we go about tracking and identifying where we focus our energy. Again, yeah.
So I think we have a lot of open questions for sure. Especially on like the 50% piece, like we need to discuss internally how we're gonna, maybe it's a objective change or something, but just to reduce energy usage, not reduce energy usage, but change the mix. I don't really think or not thinking is our primary goal, but that was a little confusing to me. But I know we are essentially out of time, but we do need to schedule our next meeting.
I definitely concur, because we need to decide on that, because if we're gonna talk about our primary goal now is to shift energy mix, that's kind of a lot different thing than changing our usage and our behavior. Like,
Yeah, there's only so much impact we can have on that energy mix, other than advocacy work and working with Duke on,
Well, we have to all do on the other side of the meter installs. I mean, that's they would have to be some kind of action.
Well, I think it's, just to, and what I'm kind of hearing is like, it might be helpful next time to really like translate this into our language, which is we're going to be speaking in energy, not in emissions, here. I think translating this into what the numbers look like for our goals, which would mean pulling the grid data and what the mix is that Duke owns, so how much clean energy we're using when we use electricity, and then kind of like going from there and deciding where are the places where we can make an impact.
And then comparing it to the IRP, right? The integrated resource plan, what Duke Energy should be doing, what's their mix going to look like?
Well, yeah, I'm projecting that doesn't work through the carbon plan. But I think, getting to the vehicles, I know at CA2A, we started our electric vehicle program when I was still working there, and electrifying because of nuclear, which, we can talk about, but because of that, it just electrifying your vehicle drops your emissions by 50% from that car, usually, depending on the car. So that's how clean our grid is here. So I think, it seems like maybe that would be really helpful next items to kind of translate this into our currency, which is energy.
So I know that city staff has kind of made the point that like we're not to get too far into the nuts and bolts. We're not here to tell you how to run, how to do your job. But I think the important thing for the next, at the outset, is that we establish our standards as far as how we're quantifying what we're doing. Because what I don't want to happen is I don't want us to get 3 years down into this and you've started electrifying the fleet, you started implementing energy efficiency measures, city council asks, well, how's your progress going? And then you don't have a way to show them. Because we've provided them with a goal, and they're gonna wanna know how we're doing towards getting to the goal. And if we don't have a way to quantify the progress, then this is, not that it's pointless, but it's gonna be so that you can't really show your progress.
I think that's spot on. We need to have a measuring stick. Going back to the question about what is clean energy, and the task force did define it on page 5.
I mean, because that was a topic of conversation,
Yeah.
and it was never answered.
It was that horse we were reading.
It does include nuclear.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Was it, did you say nuclear energy is clean energy? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's included in
Clean energy does include nuclear, yes.
And we talked
And that's just not, our definition, that's kind of,
On page 5, do you have the report, Evan?
Yeah, I've got it here. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, definitions are on page 5.
Thank you.
That's all one part question.
Yeah. Whether you agree with it or not, that's what's in the report, so we'll go with that.
yeah.
It's 6 minutes past, we still got to establish a schedule.
So,
We said every other month, right?
We said every month in the beginning.
Or what we're gonna have, our normal was gonna be every 2 months, we were gonna schedule special meetings. But the normal cadence, like moving forward, the normal cadence was always gonna be 6 times a year.
Yeah, well, I guess my understanding was that David was gonna go back and see about special meetings, like if there were any, we would have to notice those as special meetings, so we would already have to know the topic ahead of time, so I didn't know if there were like any, we would have to plan in advance, I guess, because if you publish a special meeting, you have to say exactly what's gonna be on the.
yes, it still has to meet all the, public notice.
Mhm.
No different than a regular meeting now.
It is, I think, that's what the attorney said, that a special meeting is different.
It's going to be different.
It is different. Mhm. And you have to know exactly what the topic is going to be.
You
and
have to
you have to-
cover specific topics so that they can put out public notice to that effect. Whereas regular meetings can just discuss a general agenda, and have to meet that 15-day notice requirement within the rules.
It's still doable, but I think we'd have to pick the topics then and just assign them to each special meeting so we can meet.
But our next meeting's a normal meeting. Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Would it make sense for us just to go ahead and meet, since we're a brand new baby committee, meet every month for 6 months and then go to every other month once we've sort of established our timeline and goals?
That was the plan, but we're saying that to do that, we have to schedule these special meetings as every other month. Otherwise, our mandate, our committee definition is only going to meet every 2 months. Yeah.
So your rules will say that you have to meet every other month. I believe that's what the rules of procedure say, that you certainly can schedule them more regularly than that if you'd like.
But they're special.
They can be regular meetings.
Okay, they don't have to be special.
Correct.
Right.
As long as you as a committee decide on a schedule, you can essentially publish that as your regular meeting schedule. You can go ahead and notice those meetings as regular meetings, and the rules say you do them every other month, which you are more than welcome to do them every month if you want to adopt that as your general.
We have to meet that minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood.
And so. Yeah, do you think it's more helpful for you that we have general meetings every month so we can kind of be flexible with the agenda, or do you have an idea of certain things that you want to?
I like the idea of a general meeting
Yeah.
every month. I think it gives us that flexibility.
Mhm.
So maybe we're gonna just stay on the same cadence, the second Monday of every month.
I mean, that works for me. At this time frame, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
that's up to the committee. That's part of why this is on the
Yeah,
agenda, so
that's
y'all
not
can
a meeting.
help us determine.
But what was also the rule about in this, like 5, you're no longer on the committee?
But
I would have to look at that, specifically to y'all's rules, but I think not be excused from.
yeah, if we have unexcused absences, like you just no show, like we'll call no show, like
Yeah.
otherwise you let us know that you're not going to be present.
Okay, I just did, yeah.
So I think
think the assignment for us for today was to decide, like, if there is kind of a set day that we know will be available, we could go ahead and plan on. I know two people are missing today, right? Pat and,
Owen.
Owen. So I know this time works for me, but
As long as there's no objections, I think the second Monday of every month at 1 p.m.
1 to 2:30.
Yeah.
on Zoom, is this day time okay for you guys?
That works for me. Yep.
The only issue that I have, I normally would be there, is that I need to pick my son up at school at 2:30 every other week. So there will be weeks where I'll need to leave early. But other than that, I can make a 1 o'clock meeting. I'd prefer it to be a half hour earlier if it was possible, but if it's not, I'll go with the group, no problem.
Some meetings will be shorter than others.
Yeah. Some may not last a full hour and a half, so.
So if that's going to be your schedule, there will need to be a motion, as to the dates of those meetings, that will need to be a roll call vote.
I make a motion to establish our regular meeting time at 1 p.m. on the second Monday of every month.
And will that go through, just the end of this year?
You said the first 6 months.
The first,
Correct. Starting in March.
correct.
That's correct.
Well, starting in January, so.
Well, no, because we're just here. Yeah, we're going on it now.
Oh, okay.
First of the 6 months starting in
Not
March.
proactive.
The second,
I'll second.
Okay, PJ, want to start with the roll call?
yes.
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 Aye.
Thumbs up from Andrea.
Yeah, you did hear that. Okay, so then that is established that we'll meet for the next 6 months, second Monday of the month at 1 o'clock. And I think you were gonna look at, you think this location is fine?
Yeah, I will find out, I'll submit that to the, HR, I guess is the one that approves it, so hopefully it's available.
And David, just as a note, for public hearing purposes, we will need to make sure that we specify that it will be a remote and an in-person meeting.
Yes. Yeah, we'll do.
Okay, well then I will call to adjourn.
Thank you, everyone.
Come on.
Bye, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.